In this section, we're going to talk about ethics and morality in sports. Let's start off with morals. Morals are the prevailing standards of behavior that enable people to live cooperatively in groups. Moral refers to what society sanctions as right and acceptable. Most people tend to act morally and follow societal guidelines. Morality often requires that people sacrifice their own short-term interests for the benefit of society. People or entities that who do evil acts are considered immoral. And while some moral principles seem to transcend time and culture, such as fairness, generally speaking, morality is not fixed. Morality describes the particular values of a specific group at a specific point in time. Historically, morality has been closely connected to religious traditions, but today, its significance is equally important to the secular world. For example, businesses, government agencies, and even sports teams have codes of ethics that employees and players are expected to follow. Now, ethics are the rules or standards governing the conduct by which we live our lives and make all of our decisions. One of the best ways of thinking about ethics is to take a quick look at what you would believe and then think about how you would react when those beliefs are challenged. A person who knows the difference between right and wrong and chooses right is moral. A person whose morality is reflected in his willingness to do the right thing, even if it is hard or dangerous, is ethical. Ethics are moral values in action. And let me say that again, ethics are moral values in action. Now, some philosophers make a distinction between ethics and morals, but many people use the term ethics and morals interchangeably when talking about personal beliefs, actions, or principles. For example, it's common to say, my ethics prevent me from cheating. It's also common to use morals in this sentence instead and say, my morals prevent me from cheating. Let me give you an example using a schoolyard bully. So say you're a kid in the schoolyard. You see a bully. You see a bully picking on a kid. You feel in your gut, this is wrong. Hey, congratulations, you are moral. But overcome by fear that the bully will pick on you, you find yourself frozen and unable to do anything to help the kid. And by the way, most people are moral. They know the difference between right and wrong. Okay, now you see the bully picking on another kid. You overcome the freeze and you go tell a teacher, congratulations, you are ethical. Ethics are moral values in action. Now you see the bully picking on yet another kid. You overcome the freeze, and this time you go to the aid of the kid being bullied. You put yourself at risk. Congratulations, you have the makings of an ethical warrior. So let's look at some of the differences between morals and ethics, and let's start off with the origin. The origin of the word morals comes from the Latin word mos, meaning custom, or the custom of the people. Ethics comes from the Greek word ethos, meaning character. Where do they come from? Morals come from the social system, from the external. They come from the group of people you are living with, whether that be your family, the city, the county, the state, the country, the hemisphere. Right? So these customs are coming from that system. Ethics comes from the individual. These are internal. So this is what the individual person believes. Why we do it? Well, we do these because society says it's the right thing to do. Ethics, it's because we believe something is right or wrong. Again, it's an individual choice. And flexibility? Well, morals are dependent on others for definition. They tend to be consistent within a certain context, but can vary between contexts. Where ethics usually are consistent, although can change if an individual's beliefs change. So an ethical dilemma is circumstances when choices have to be made between two equally unsatisfactory alternatives. Occasionally, and maybe often, we come up with ethical dilemmas in our lives. And let's just give an example of a streetcar. And the streetcar is rolling out of control down a track towards 5 people who cannot get out of the way and will surely all be killed by the impact. There is a switch that you can throw to send the car onto a sidetrack and save those 5 people. But that sidetrack has one person on it who would be killed. What would you do? The easy answer is to switch the track to the less harmful situation. But the answer is really not that easy at all, since your choice will cause someone to die, and killing another human being is unethical. This is an ethical dilemma. A moral problem is a situation which a problem or dilemma is experienced between your own values and norms and those of other people. A situation by which your own account is not correct or should not occur. Probably one of the biggest hot buttons in the world is that about abortion rights and the right to terminate a pregnancy. And there are strong arguments on both sides of these, and this is a great example of a moral problem. So let me give you some examples now in the world of sports. And we'll give you examples from soccer, football, baseball, cycling, and let's start off with soccer. One of the most infamous goals in World Cup history happened in the World Cup quarterfinal between England and Argentina. And it was nicknamed the Hand of God. And this happened with Diego Maradona in the 1986 World Cup. And let me just start off with just showing you.
The wide men have found little space in this contest. This is not true of Olatico Echea at the moment, but certainly it's been true of the England team. Haven't seen that much of Hodge or Trevor Steven. Maradona just walked away from Hoddle then. Valdano, Hodge and Maradona! They're appealing for offside. The ball came back off the foot of Steve Hodge, and Maradona gives Argentina the lead. The England players protesting to the referee. But the little man who started it by walking past Glenn Hoddle, that's where the ball came from Hodge. Maradona had continued the run forward, and the goal is given. At what point was he offside? Or was it a use of the hand that England are complaining about?
And it was indeed a handball, and he's going to talk about it now. This is several years later.
It was your hand or the hand of God?
It was my hand. With this, I don't mean any disrespect to English fans. But this is something that happens. We used to do this. I had scored goals before in Argentina with my hand. It was a goal that I couldn't reach it, and Shilton was already there, so I couldn't head it. So I did like that. And I moved my head back. And I started running because I started to run at first. Shilton didn't realize. And the one who told him he was the sweeper, he was the one who seized my hand.
Butcher.
Butcher. Entonces,
when I see the linesman running, I go out shouting goal, and I look behind me to see whether the referee took the bait. And he had. So that was it. Come on, it was a goal.
Let's move now to an example in football of some unethical play. Recently, in the NFL, there was the Deflategate issue, and this involved the New England Patriots and deflated footballs in a victory, in a playoff victory over the Colts, in which the end result was that quarterback Tom Brady was suspended for 4 games, and the team was fined $1 million and lost 2 draft picks. And this came about because the Patriots were accused of underinflating the footballs so that they could obtain a better grip on them. There was a legal limit or minimum as to how much air needs to be in the footballs, and it was found that several of their balls were underinflated, and they were caught doing that. In baseball, one of the most infamous times was the steroid era, and this occurred during the 90s to the 2000s, when steroids were used in Major League Baseball to shatter long-standing records and raise players' salaries to astronomical prices. During this time, the use of steroids, it was a very gray area. Baseball they had not necessarily outlawed them, but they weren't testing for them either. So a lot of players were allegedly taking steroids, which resulted in a lot of records being broken. Since the steroid era, Major League Baseball implemented strict steroid testing over the years. Teams have relied more on pitching, defense, and small ball instead of home runs. And let me show you an example here of one of the leaders of that steroid era was Barry Bonds. And those steroids have been banned in Major League Baseball since 1991. The league did not implement league-wide testing on performance-enhancing drug testing until 2003. And here's a picture of Barry Bonds when he was in the minor leagues. And you'll see he was this very thin kid growing up. And then several years later, Barry apparently did a lot of lifting and ate right and gained a lot of muscle as a result of that. But Barry Bonds shattered a lot of the major league records. And let me show you one of those records that he broke was the home run record, or number of home runs hit in a year, 73. And if you go down, and these are the, my arrow here, these are the highest number of home runs hit per year through the history of baseball. And you're going to see that Barry Bonds leads with 73 in 2001. And then if you go down 98, 98, 99, 2001, and then it drops off in 99. And then in 1961 was when the next highest was hit. So all these here were during that steroid era. And all these players, Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, and Sammy Sosa, were all implicated in the steroid era. And to this day, while all of them were great players and put up fantastic and amazing numbers, none of them have been voted into the Hall of Fame, primarily because of their implication into the steroids, even though it was never proven, and all of them have denied taking them. Let's get on to one of the most infamous sports for use of performance-enhancing drugs, and that is cycling. And let me just show you an example here of the top 10 finishers of the Tour de France that have been tainted by doping. And since 1998, more than a third of the top finishers of the Tour de France have admitted to using performance-enhancing drugs in their careers, or have been officially linked to doping. And this grid shows the original top 10 placements in each of the years between 98 and 2011. And the riders pictured have either tested positive, admitted to doping, or been sanctioned by an official cycling or anti-doping agency. Cyclists who were sanctioned were later overturned and they're not included. So just take a quick look here at the number of cyclists who, and you'll see the winner from 98 all the way to 2007. All these cyclists here, and you notice this one, Lance Armstrong, all these cyclists were implicated and or banned from the sport for using drugs. Of course, Lance Armstrong admitted to doping in an interview with Oprah, saying, that's like saying we have to have air in our tires or water in our bottles. It was part of the job. In other words, Lance said that everybody was doping. He added, I looked up the definition of cheating, and the definition is to gain an advantage on a rival or foe. I did not view it that way. I viewed it as a level playing field. In other words, he felt that since everybody else was doping, that he could dope and wasn't necessarily gaining an advantage. It was just keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. So now when rendering moral judgment, let's talk about these 5 steps on how to do that. The first step is to obtain and clarify all the pertinent facts of the case or incident. So all the facts must be presented. For example, who was there? Look at a timeline of when these events occurred and find out what occurred. The next step would be to identify and voice the ethical sayings to be used. Are there any specific rules that apply? So in this case of sport, you would look at the rules of that specific sport and you would factor those in to whether or not the athlete was unethical or immoral in their actions. Are there any unwritten but generally accepted rules? And do any of these cover the issues at hand? Are there broader societal standards that can be invoked? And finally, do any policies of the institution cover that issue at hand? Step 3 is the time that the incident took place. So look at the time before the incident, motivation and intent during that time, also the consequences that resulted because of the incident. Step 4 would be to identify and discuss the extenuating or special circumstances. So at the time, are there extenuating circumstances that are the root of the cause? After you've looked at all 4 of those steps, you can render judgment as to whether or not the action was moral or unethical. Oftentimes, ethics comes in shades of gray. And it's not always possible to decide absolutely in terms of black and white, right or wrong, good or bad. Let's take the example of Greg Louganis. And you've already watched the video and the documentary on Greg Louganis and his story. And let's look at the incident that occurred when he was competing in the Olympics. Greg, of course, was diagnosed as HIV positive. And in the 1988 Olympics, he hit his head on a diving board during a dive, opening a large laceration in his head, which bled into the pool. So when this happened in 1988, summarize the ethical and moral dilemmas that took place, and use the following questions to help guide your decision. So in competing in the Olympics, while knowing he was HIV positive, was he posing a risk to others? By not informing the U.S. team physician to stitch his bleeding wound without wearing gloves, was this ethical or immoral? And think back to when you're watching this video. If you watch the doctor at the time, they didn't use gloves. So the doctor was stitching Greg's head up with bare hands, with the blood going onto those bare hands. And finally, think about the fact that Greg did not inform the organizers of the competition that he was HIV positive. Was this ethical or immoral? And that concludes the ethics and moralities in sport.